And good evening, I'm Sam Brock, in for Gadi Schwartz. You're watching Stay Tuned Now, and we are following breaking news as we come on the air this evening, and a historic decision tonight. Colorado Supreme Court ruling that former President Donald Trump is disqualified from the state's 2024 Republican primary ballot. The court finding that Trump violated the U.S. Constitution over his role in the January 6th Capitol attack. Now, Colorado becomes the first state to disqualify Trump from an election ballot. Courts in other states with similar cases ruled against disqualification or dismissed it for procedural reasons. Trump's campaign responding to that ruling in a statement, calling the decision, quote, completely flawed, and saying Trump will appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos joining us now with much more on this developing story. Danny, thanks for being here. And of course, at the center of this case is Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and language around, quote, engaging in insurrection against the Constitution after taking an oath to support it. Does this effectively mean, Danny, that they found Trump is liable for citing an insurrection?
Yes, but actually the Supreme Court didn't make that finding. That finding was actually done by the lower court in Colorado. And we're talking about the Supreme Court of Colorado and a Colorado district court, which is the trial court. They held a 5-day trial, and they concluded by clear and convincing evidence that Donald Trump had committed an insurrection. However, interestingly enough, that trial court had concluded that even though he did commit an insurrection, he is not an officer, and I'm making air quotes, he's not an officer within the meaning of Section 3. In other words, he doesn't fit within the definition. He doesn't take the oath. The officers mean different people in the government other than the elected president. But the Colorado Supreme Court reversed on that issue, upholding the insurrection part of it, but reversing the district court on the issue of whether or not Section 3 applies to the president. So you have insurrection plus Section 3 applies. Therefore, the Colorado Supreme Court concludes he is disqualified under Section 3 and more technically disqualified under Colorado law. And the court had to conclude that Colorado does have the power to decide the qualifications as a state for candidates on the ballot, which is another constitutional issue. This entire case is rife with different constitutional issues, each of which may be taken up by the United States Supreme Court.
Maybe or will be, I guess, is the question now, right? Because Trump's team, we know, has said an appeal is coming. So assuming that this does make it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, what are the broader implications, Danny, if the high court affirms this ruling?
There are a number of different appealable issues. For example, Section 3 aside for the moment, does the Colorado judiciary even have the power to adjudicate an issue like this? Is it what is called in the Constitution a non-justiciable political question? Is it something that is left to Congress to decide? In other words, is it Congress that decides by passing enabling legislation that someone has engaged in insurrection? Who decides? It's something that Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh often asks. A lot of these questions comes down to who makes the decision. And does the Colorado District Court and the Supreme Court, does the Colorado judiciary even have the power to make this determination as to whether or not a presidential candidate in a national election is even on the ballot? The Supreme Court, the Colorado Supreme Court, concluded that, yes, it does have that power, and it did make that decision.
That's their decision. So now, as you suggest, this could be an issue of domain. I guess we'll find out. But if the Supreme Court does act here, I mean, is timing of the essence? And I say this knowing that the Iowa caucuses are on January 15th. The Colorado presidential primary is March 5th. We're only a few months away, Danny. How quickly does the court have to act here?
There's a deadline, in fact, baked into the opinion. The matter is stayed. In other words, the case itself, the implications are paused until January 24th, and that is the day before the state of Colorado, the Secretary of State, has to make a decision as to who's on the ballot. So the clock is ticking, and it is ticking fast. So there are a number of deadlines fast approaching. And so this needs to be adjudicated sooner rather than later because the ballot implications, I know the election isn't for many months out, but there are a lot of deadlines that are coming up very quickly.
And the questions abound. Danny Cevallos starting us off this evening. Thank you so much. We turn now to the war in the Middle East, where tonight Israel's President Isaac Herzog said the country was, quote, ready for another humanitarian pause, but said it's up to Hamas whether or not that happens. Now, his comments coming one day after Israel, the U.S., and Qatar met in Poland to discuss a possible agreement. For Israel, of course, one of the key priorities here will be the release of hostages. Yesterday, Hamas put out a video of 3 elderly men in captivity. In it, the man in the middle you see there, 79-year-old Chaim Perry, said that they were suffering and begged to be returned. But in the last 24 hours, Hamas said it will not negotiate those releases until Israel stops its attacks on Gaza. This, as the U.S. has called for the stop of indiscriminate airstrikes throughout the Gaza Strip. According to the Hamas-run Ministry of Health, more than 19,600 people have died there so far, more than 50,000 people injured. Today, people in the southern city of Rafah mourning their loved ones. That includes one grandmother processing the deaths of her 2 young grandchildren, including a 2-week-old baby. A warning now that the interview we are about to show you may be disturbing for some to watch.
عندي أحفادي الاثنين الأميرة عائشة عمرها أسبوعين اسمها ما تسجل في النفوذ ما معها شهادة ميلاد يعني مجهولة الهوية من يوم ما اتولدت ما معها شهادة ميلاد وأخوها عمره 2 سنين استشهد أبوها متكسر عنده.
Impossible to even conceive what you're seeing there. Meanwhile, tensions are growing across the Middle East. Iranian-backed Houthi militants have continued their attacks on shipping vessels and oil tankers trying to cross the Red Sea, disrupting global trade. Now the U.S. is forming a coalition to fight back. NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson joining us now, continuing her critical reporting from the region. Hallie, let's start right there with the talks of a pause. And based on what President Herzog said today and what you're hearing from people there in Israel, are they one step closer in actuality to a humanitarian pause?
It's a great question, Sam, and I think it's a fair characterization to say they're maybe creeping closer, but we are not seeing, a huge leap towards some kind of a humanitarian pause that would have 2 impacts, right? Number one, it would alleviate potentially some of what you're seeing on the screen, some of what you just showed, that humanitarian suffering in Gaza. It would allow more aid into the Gaza Strip. The other part of it, of course, it would allow potentially hostages to come home. The hostages who are being held captive now in Gaza, believed to be more than 130 of them, at least at this point. So what are the chances something happens? You heard the comments from Herzog. You are seeing the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, under new pressure now from people in his country, meeting with family members of hostages who have been really trying to make the point, time is running out. You've got to do this. You've got to bring them home. You've got to do it ASAP. One man who was in that meeting actually met with a different world leader, President Biden, not too long ago, Sam. His name is Ruby Khan, and his son is being held, he believes, by Hamas. Here's what he said.
It was a productive meeting where we also asked what we can do more for him. But at the end of the day, the buck stops here. He is the one that is responsible and the one that has the ability to bring our loved ones back home alive.
I've also talked to other family members of hostages, including family members of 2 of those Israeli hostages killed by the IDF, who tell me that America, President Biden, right, the U.S. government also plays a critical role here, too, because of the muscle that it has on the world stage to try to be able to bring these parties together to get to some kind of a deal. So, glimmer of hope, perhaps. But I will say the Biden administration is also tempering expectations. They're trying to level set here, saying, listen, talks do not appear to be, any kind of deal does not appear to be imminent at this point, according to a top national security official. Leave it to you to talk about, what does imminent mean? It could mean a lot of things, right? Hours, days, weeks. But at this point, at least there is some motion, which is something we couldn't have said even just a week ago, Sam.
For sure, and it's hard to overstate, Hallie, just how fragile these conversations are. Wanted to bring up the other topic right now that is really becoming prominent, namely many countries, including the U.S., increasingly worried about these Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. If you can break down for us, who are the Houthis and what's their motivation here for attacking the vessels in the first place?
Totally. So the Houthis are this Iran-backed militant group, this sort of proxy group that's part of the so-called Axis of Resistance, with this goal, essentially, of trying to defy the West, basically. And so you are seeing now the Houthis. You've got Hezbollah, you've got Hamas, you've got the Houthis. We know what's happening with Hamas, obviously, in Gaza. We've talked about what's happening with Hezbollah up north in Israel on the southern border with Lebanon. You have the Houthis in the Red Sea, looking to potentially take advantage of this moment now where there's a lot of tension in the region. There's a war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, and they are attacking essentially these commercial tankers, these commercial vessels, these commercial ships in the Red Sea. The Defense Department says there have been more than 100 attacks in this area. It's like drones. Some of it is obviously extremely problematic to these big shipping companies, many of whom have paused operations in the Red Sea. That has an economic impact, right? Because now they're having to go down and around, essentially, to get the goods where they need to go. That takes longer, and the longer these attacks go on, the longer that becomes a potential issue for the global supply chain. So what is the U.S. doing? You have the Defense Secretary now rolling out this initiative to try to combat this, and the idea is deterrence. A senior military official says that they believe that the presence of U.S. ships in the Red Sea is a deterrent, does have a deterrence factor. And so if you're wondering, well, what does that even look like? What do? Do they escort each commercial tanker? Not likely here. And one senior military official put it in a way that I think folks might be able to visualize it. It helped me. Think about I-95, that corridor between Washington, D.C. and Boston, Massachusetts. Think about that distance. That's like the southern third of the Red Sea. Something like 400 ships are traversing there at any given time. The U.S. is not going to escort every single one, but the idea of sort of zone defense presence in the region would hopefully, the U.S. hopes, have an impact in lessening these Houthi attacks, allowing shipping companies to feel more comfortable sending their ships through. Obviously, if there's an instance where there's a particular threat and the U.S. does need to escort, that could happen. The door is open to that, according to military officials. But that's the dynamic that I think you'll see play out now in the Red Sea. The question is, at what point will that message get through to the Houthis? And at what point will these shipping companies feel more comfortable being able to send goods back through?
And at what point will there need to be intervention beyond what we've already seen with 10 different countries participating in that coalition, Hallie, but only one from the Middle East, Bahrain. Hallie Jackson there live for us in Tel Aviv. Thank you so much for that insight, Hallie. Well, it is a race against the clock in northwest China. Search and rescue teams right now rushing to find survivors after a powerful earthquake struck the Gansu province. Officials say at least 127 people are dead. Many are still trapped underneath the rubble. The 6.2 magnitude earthquake had 9 aftershocks, making evacuation and recovery efforts more difficult. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer has more.
It's an all-out race to try to find people in the rubble. Rescue teams have been working day and night, and now they are saying the next 48 hours are crucial. There are nearly 2,000 firefighters who are working at the epicenter, and temporary shelters have been set up. Officials say 127 people have been killed, more than 500 are injured. The quake struck around midnight, the tremors lasting 20 seconds, and felt 65 miles away in the city of Lungzhou. Videos show people rushing out of their homes and then huddling in the bitter cold temperatures, hovering around 0 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. This has happened in a part of the country that is remote and mountainous and where earthquakes are not uncommon, but this is on course to be one of the deadliest in the past decade. China's earthquake administration says the quake was shallow and powerful, measuring at magnitude 6.2. The initial USGS estimate puts it at magnitude 5.9. The government here has issued orders for an all-out search and rescue effort. Money and equipment have been deployed to try to get people to safety, to try to get them warmth, to get electricity and water infrastructure back on track. The concern, of course, is that the cold is hampering efforts and the toll of this quake is set to rise.
Just devastating there. Janice Mackey-Frayer, thank you so much. Staying overseas now, and we turn to Iceland and that potentially dangerous volcanic eruption that is threatening communities near the capital. NBC's Miguel Almaguer has the very latest.
The incredible fountains of fire gushed more than 300 feet into the air, igniting the night sky in Iceland. Erupting Monday, the astonishing display of fire and fury continues to pour across the southwestern end of the country, an hour outside the capital of Reykjavik.
It's a once in a lifetime for us.
A 2.5-mile-long fissure is now creating an expansive boiling sea of molten lava, threatening to slowly spread closer to populated regions. But for now, the blanket of fire not yet causing serious damage.
Fascinating to see just nature in action. It's just like something from a movie.
As researchers descend closer to the spouts of fire, this is a magical spectacle, even in a country no stranger to eruptions. After weeks of seismic activity, nearby towns were evacuated days before lava even seeped from the Earth's floor. The flows now slowing.
It is very, very powerful in the beginning. It's going to extract the magma very, very fast, and that's why it's going to decline very fast.
Still pouring smoke into the air, it doesn't appear this eruption will cause the same havoc a different Icelandic volcano did in 2010. That explosion of fumes and ash grounded much of Europe's air travel for a week. But tonight, scientists warn eruptions can be as unpredictable as they are spectacular. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News.
All right, don't go anywhere because we are just getting started. Later this hour, from the toilet to your tap, we'll tell you about California's plans to turn wastewater into water you can actually drink. Plus, a controversial new law at the border that could put migrants who enter the country illegally in prison for up to 20 years. And the cleanup continues tonight. Downed trees, flooded towns, and thousands of families still without power. We'll look at the recovery after a powerful storm system swept through the Northeast. That's coming up next.
So when the tree fell, it made a hole, and then the rubble fell on me, and then it made scratches on my back.
Did it wake you up right out of bed?
No, my mom woke me up.
And welcome back. Here are some of the stories that we're keeping a close eye on this evening, starting with this. This morning, mourners attending the funeral service of late Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. That service was held at the Washington National Cathedral, where O'Connor served on its governing board. President Joe Biden was in attendance and delivered one of the eulogies. Here in Florida, a house explosion sent a family of 4 to the hospital and destroyed their home. That's what's left of it. 3 of the 4 people staying inside are seriously injured, we're told, with a combination of burns and broken bones. Officials say some type of gas issue caused that explosion, but an investigation is currently underway. For all the Chick-fil-A lovers out there, and I'm sure there are many, soon you may no longer have to wait until Monday to satisfy your chicken craving if you live in New York. A lawmaker has introduced a bill there that would require all restaurants inside rest stops in the state of New York to be open 7 days a week. That bill must pass both the state houses before going to the governor's desk. And another food product has joined the ever-growing recall list. Fresh Express spinach right now is recalling 2 types of its bagged spinach due to potential health risks from listeria. No illnesses have been reported in connection with that recall so far. And finally, Blue Origin has successfully launched its new Shepherd rocket. It's the first flight since the crash that occurred more than a year ago. While no one was on board of this flight, it could tee up future trips for the company for paying customers. Well, several states in the Northeast still remain under flood warnings right now in the aftermath of that storm that drenched the entire region and much of the East Coast. Some people saw their backyards turning into lakes. Today, rescuers were still paddling through streets, taking anyone stranded to safety. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa is in New Jersey tonight with more on those cleanup efforts.
Well, Sam, even more than a day since the rain left this area, you can see the flood waters linger and they continue to fluctuate. Some major rivers across the Northeast region continue to rise in level, including the Passaic River, not far from where I'm standing now. And what happens with these rivers, even after the rain has long passed, the grounds are so saturated, there's nowhere for the water to go as tributaries and other waterways lead into them. And so they spill over into communities like this, inundating cars and homes. Not far far from where I'm standing earlier today, I witnessed a water rescue. A 14-year-old was stranded inside her home, surrounded by water that had risen at an unexpected rate. We went along with the crew who picked her up and then brought her back to dry ground safely after this entire region had been battered by such a massive storm. So many power outages, hundreds of thousands linger into tonight as the temperatures remain cold, and that could be the case for several more days to come as this massive cleanup process gets underway throughout the entire northeast region. Keep in mind, some residents have yet to even begin to assess the damage to their home, blocked by waters and floodwaters like this. Just days out from the Christmas holiday, Sam, we know at least 5 people have died from the storm system in the northeast.
Yeah, tragic and very tough timing there. Emily, thank you so much. Well, it's a tale right now of two coasts, as the East Coast is cleaning up, as Emily just showed you, after a windy winter storm. The West Coast is now bracing for its own wild weather. NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns tells us what's in store. Bill?
Well, good evening to you, Sam. And the next big story will be what happens with this storm on the West Coast. How bad will the flooding be? Hopefully, it'll be nothing like what we've seen in areas of New Jersey and especially Maine. They're still recovering. There's still areas getting flooded, even new areas as I speak. So this big storm in the West. So far, it's been sitting off the coast. We've had bands of rain, some occasional heavy snow and showers. The main event, though, is not going to occur most likely until Thursday into Friday. Now, this is what we call a cutoff low. It's moving very slowly. It's not in the fast flow across the country. So this one's going to take its sweet time. We have 21 million people under flash flood watches, and includes all the way down to San Diego, Oceanside, Los Angeles, all of the mountains outside of L.A. over to Santa Barbara and northwards up the coast to San Luis Obispo. That is where, if we have heavy rain in the mountainous areas, especially if there's burn scars, we can get those mud and those debris flows. So here's kind of the timing of everything. This is as we go throughout the day on Wednesday. So by 5 p.m., everyone's heading home. Everyone in L.A. and down to San Diego, Oceanside, you're okay. Just a few showers. But the heavier band will be right along the coast. This will be the beginning of the flood threat. So late Wednesday, then we're going to continue hit and miss heavy rain showers and storms on the coast. And then it looks like on Thursday evening is when the best chance for Los Angeles and Southern California to get into the heavier rain, maybe even some thunderstorms. And again, that would be Thursday night into Friday morning, the greatest flood threat. And then during the day Friday, we take that rain through areas of Arizona. So the flood risk, as we head towards tomorrow, it does look like we're going to see the possibility of some debris and mud flows. We're also going to be looking at Santa Barbara to Los Angeles. And again, this goes all the way out till Friday, too. So a multi-day event, and the accumulation of the same areas getting rain day after day makes the flooding, more widespread or more easily to occur. So locally, anywhere in yellow was 1 inch, orange is 2 inches. We get the red, that's 3 inches. That's widespread in the mountains near Santa Barbara and near Los Angeles. Isolated areas may even get up to around 6 to 7 inches. It's a very warm storm, so the snow levels are extremely high. Yes, the mountain peaks will get it above 8,000 feet, but this isn't exactly like those storms from last winter that were cold and the snow levels were really low. So here's your travel forecast as we head towards the Christmas weekend. So Friday, rain Chicago to Dallas, also in St. Louis. This shouldn't be too bad. Maybe some delays. The storm that we're tracking in areas from Los Angeles Friday will be heading towards Phoenix. So wet roads there, maybe some minor airport delays. Saturday, the storm will be in the Four Corner region. We will get some snow in the mountains near Telluride, San Juan, Santa Fe, Taos. That area could get some snow. Also the Wasatch Range. So that's good if anyone has any holiday ski plans in those areas. By Sunday, spring-like temperatures much of the East Coast for Christmas Eve. We will watch some of that rain threat for Louisiana and also into Arkansas. If you want the white Christmas, Sam, we're talking Denver northwards up to Cheyenne, possibly around Rapid City. That's the best bet. Then for Christmas Day, some leftover snow in the Dakotas. But unfortunately, Christmas Day looking very wet from the Gulf Coast all the way through the Great Lakes.
Yeah, we'll take the Christmas snow over dashing through the rain any day. Bill Cairns, thank you so much. Let's move now to Texas, where Republican Governor Greg Abbott signed a controversial new law that targets migrants entering the state from a foreign country. Under this new legislation, migrants could face up to 20 years in prison if they don't enter through a lawful port of entry. That law is set to take effect in March, certainly going to be challenged. Here's how Governor Abbott explained it earlier today.
Biden's deliberate inaction has left Texas to fend for itself. The only thing we are doing by this law is making sure that our law enforcement have the tools they need to actually take action against those who are actually coming across the border illegally.
Our Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley has more.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed 3 immigration bills into law, but the most controversial by far is Senate Bill 4, which would designate police officers, local and state, in the state of Texas to arrest any migrant that they suspect crossed the border illegally. That's not just someone who they're sure crossed the border illegally, but on suspicion. If they crossed anywhere between the Rio Grande River and in between legal ports of entry, that means police would be able to arrest them and have the authority to patrol areas of high migrant populations, like a Colony Village, which is an apartment complex in Houston. Now, civil liberties groups like the ACLU, as you can expect, are outraged. In fact, the ACLU of Texas already filed a lawsuit today, and the Biden administration has come out and said that this is a violation of federal law, and we could expect to see a lawsuit from them at some point as well, although at this point the Justice Department is declining to comment about if and when they will challenge this in court. But by and large, the reason this is so controversial and so wildly different from anything we've seen in the past is that immigration is a federal policy that's enforced by federal agents. CBP, ICE, DHS oversees those agents. This would then take that authority and place it in the hands of state and locals who first have limited resources in their jails, for their police, for their first responders, and it would also allow for an entirely different legal system to decide who gets to stay in the United States. Right now, an immigrant would go before an immigration judge, which is an entirely different court system. It's actually run by the Justice Department, but under this new law, they would go before Texas state judges who don't have that kind of training in determining who can and can't stay in the law in the United States based on immigration law. So it's an entirely radical departure. Now, Texas Governor Greg Abbott says this is a necessary change because he says that Biden has had an inability to show any real change on the border. It also comes when he signed that law, it was the day of a new record high at the southern border. We understand that just yesterday there were over 12,000 migrants who crossed the border undocumented, and more than 11,000 of those were illegal. And so this is coming as Abbott has headwind on an issue like this to try to take some action. But he's sure to have a legal challenge. And if this does go forward, we can expect to see a lot of headaches over how Texas will actually implement this law with the limited resources they have and how they're going to try as a state to decide who can and can't stay in this country.
An immigration crisis once again headed to the courts. Julia Ainsley, thank you so much. Coming up next, it is a question that will soon pop up for some Californians. Would you drink wastewater if it's been properly treated? That's the important caveat. California just approved rules to create a new source of water in the drought-stricken state. But first, you gotta see this to believe it. A Michigan woman graduating from Ferris State University. Yes, that is a baby in her gown. You're looking there at Grace Shimshak, who walked across the stage with her 10-day-old newborn tucked into her gown, graduating magna cum laude, by the way, with a bachelor's degree in what else? Early childhood education. When her baby came 10 days early, Grace knew that she still wanted to walk the stage in the hopes of inspiring other moms to go back to school. And it really does go to show you, moms really can do it all, as if we would expect anything else. We'll be right back. In California, a state that's been struggling with years of drought conditions, a new source of water is about to come on tap. Some have called it toilet to tap, since it's sewage water that's getting some high-powered treatment. The state just passing new rules, paving the way to turn highly purified, recycled wastewater into drinking water. California becoming just the second state after Colorado that's signing off on the new source, with states like Florida and Arizona also working on new regulations of their own. Joining us now is NBC News correspondent Noah Pransky to dig in on this. Noah, thank you so much for being here. We know what it sounds like, but how exactly would this process work? I know there's a 63-page document in terms of the regulations, and honestly, is it popular, this idea for Californians?
It's getting more and more popular in a lot of the western states because they need to. The drought issues are expected to be a long-term issue. So more and more elected leaders are getting on board but they have to deal with this issue of consumer confidence and, taking water from the sewer system and putting it in your drinking glass. There are some obvious issues for some consumers. In fact, a lot of critics have effectively labeled it toilet to tap instead of what, proponents would rather call it, which is highly purified water or reclaimed water, direct, potable, reused water. Those don't necessarily roll off the tongue, but the technology is pretty impressive. In fact, the reused water is cleaner than a lot of America's other water supplies. But don't take my word for it. I'm going to let a couple experts explain for you here.
We have a wastewater treatment facility first that makes it very clean, and then we have additional processes to make it to drinking water standards. So there's a whole technology in between the toilet and the tap.
There is a very extensive advanced water treatment process, and it goes through 3 stages. So microfiltration, reverse osmosis, and ultraviolet light disinfection, and the water is pure water at the end.
It's actually the same technology that they use on the International Space Station. So if it's good enough for our astronauts, well, the water should be clean enough for Californians. That's at least what we heard today.
So I'm wondering, Noah, as far as how long it has taken the state of California to evaluate this and actually develop the system. I know I was out in the San Francisco Bay Area a number of years ago. They were working on it then. Is it new in terms of its application now? What's different?
So California counties have been experimenting and developing this for many, many years. In fact, a lot of other countries have been doing this for even longer. The technology isn't new, but as I mentioned, the consumer confidence piece has really slowed this down in much of the country. In California, Orange County now recycles 100% of its water. They do not pump it directly into the drinking supply. They actually pump it into the ground where the drinking supply comes from. So it's kind of an indirect recycling process, but this new California regulation, if it is approved next year, as it is expected to be, it would allow counties to basically build new facilities and then pump the water directly into the water supply, directly, not indirectly. And Orange County, we're expecting to be one of the first online, but also we're seeing San Diego and Los Angeles experiment now, and they would likely fast track this as well.
Noah, looking forward to your taste tests for part 2 of this.
I'm on board.
A year or 2 down the road. Thank you so much, my friend.
Sure.
Good sport. That is Noah Pransky for you. All right, taking a turn now. Still to come, searching for answers. A family who is desperate to find out what really happened to one woman who was kidnapped in the Gaza Strip. But NBC found out she may not have been abducted by Hamas, but possibly by a mob of Gazans or another group. That story is next. Stay tuned. On October the 7th, Noah Argamani was at the Supernova Music Festival when Hamas attacked. The video of her being kidnapped has been seen around the world. And like a majority of the festival goers, Noah's whereabouts are still unknown to this day. NBC Digital Doc spent time investigating her capture to learn more about Israel's ongoing hostage crisis. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez has more.
The terror can be seen in what remains and what's been left behind. Signs of panic, of violence, a massacre. More than 200 hostages are kidnapped across southern Israel in the October 7th terror attack. Most are taken from 4 kibbutzim and the Supernova Music Festival. Among them is 26-year-old Noah Argamani, one of the first faces of the hostage crisis that will shape the coming war. After nearly 2 months of relentless bombardment of Gaza in response to the attack, a ceasefire deal is reached. The terms of the deal are specific. Israeli women and children released in exchange for Palestinian women and children held in Israeli prisons. Over 7 days in late November, more than 100 hostages are freed. But by the 8th day,
the ceasefire has abruptly ended in Gaza with deadly fighting resuming.
But many women remain in captivity. The U.S. and Israel say it's Hamas's refusal to release this specific group that derails the ceasefire. What leads to the deal finally falling apart?
Hamas reneged. It had agreed to a list of names, and it suddenly couldn't provide these people, or didn't want to provide these people.
Noa Argamani is one of those women, still held after her abduction from the Supernova Festival, the all-night dance party attacked by Hamas. NBC News reviewed photographs, text messages, and used mapping tools to reconstruct the moment of Noa's kidnapping, trying to understand why she still hasn't been freed, what her story tells us about the fate of the remaining hostages, and the future of the war raging around them.
This is the place Noa used to go to get some peace, some quiet. She liked this place very much.
Noa's close friends, Bar, Noa, and Jan, take us to a ridge above Beersheba. Gaza is just over 20 miles away. Israeli aircraft roar overhead.
She's so close and yet so far. She was like the best friend ever. She always saw the best in people.
Everybody liked her. That's why she was like, he's like a glue of all the friends.
Was Noa excited about the Nova Festival?
I think she wasn't sure if she will go, and it was like a spontaneous thing.
Around 6:30 a.m. on October 7th, the skies over the Supernova Festival fill with rockets. But to Noa and other festival goers, the scale of the attack is not yet clear. At 7:46 a.m., Noa's friend texts this photo saying they're safe. But 20 minutes later, fear is starting to spread. We are here at the parking lot, staying put. An hour later, Noa sends her location, with hope that somebody will come and save us. At 9:24 a.m., 3 hours into the attack, Noa's boyfriend, Avinatan Or, sends this photo. Noa is huddled on the ground, hiding. It's the last known picture before they're kidnapped. It's crazy here. Avinatan's friend texts that no one's answering at Israel's equivalent of 911. He replies, "Try asking again." They are finding people one by one and killing them. Noa's final text message is at 10:27 a.m. "We don't have a car." What does that mean? Avinatan's friend keeps texting. "Give me a sign, bro. I'm begging you. Give me something, Avinatan. Something. Please." After hours of silence, a video appears online.
The first video that I saw was Noa's drinking water, so I was like, oh, she's okay. So there's nothing to worry about.
We didn't know if maybe she's in Israel, in the border, in the house or something.
But then they see this video.
I think 10 minutes after we saw the kidnapped video, this was like a nightmare.
I remember that I was in my car in the parking lot. I was just sitting and rewatching it a million times, over and over.
What do you see in her face when you watch that video?
I would say she was frightened to death.
You can see it on her eyes, the way she cried for help.
An NBC News analysis of Noa's kidnapping video suggests it was filmed on this road here, half a mile from the Supernova site. This location has a field and tree line like the ones over Noa's shoulder, and the buildings in the distance appear to be the nearby kibbutz Re'im when matched to satellite imagery. Shadows cast by the sun appear to be in keeping with the timing of Noa's last text message. It suggests they were heading southeast along this dirt road before disappearing into Gaza. For the next 7 weeks, Gaza echoes with the sounds of war. For Palestinians, a staggering death toll. Now, more than 18,000 dead, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, mainly women and children. and growing every day. But on the fate of Noah, there's only silence.
This is the worst situation because you want to stay with hope, but you don't know anything.
Were you hopeful she would come out during the ceasefire?
We were hoping that if not today, then tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, we felt that Noah is with us, you know. It's like we saw her with us again. You can just see it behind a glass, but you cannot quite touch it yet.
Across Israel, fear is growing for the remaining hostages, and alongside it, anger among hostage families, much of it aimed at the Israeli government. In a leaked recording, verified by NBC News, a freed hostage confronts Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
When you're negotiating with a group like Hamas, it's not clear that they are prepared to release all the hostages. I mean, our goal is to get everyone released. Hamas isn't going to release hostages because they've suddenly become humanitarians. They will only release hostages when they feel compelled to do so. And the military pressure worked in the past. It can hopefully work in the future. What is the alternative? There isn't one.
What we hear over and over again is they want the hostages to be the priority, not destroying Hamas, and they feel like the government is prioritizing destroying Hamas.
From our perspective as a government, yes, we see no contradiction between the goal of defeating Hamas, destroying Hamas, and getting the hostages out.
We wanted to understand, why did Hamas release mothers, children, even some men, but not Noah and the young women around her? In Washington, the State Department offered one theory.
It seems one of the reasons they don't want to turn women over that they've been holding hostage, and the reason this pause fell apart, is they don't want those women to be able to talk about what happened to them during their time in custody.
Does the Israeli government have any information that supports that?
We fear for the state of the hostages. Anyone who saw what Hamas was capable of on October 7th, the sort of violence, whether it's the beheadings, the burning of people alive, the rapes.
NBC News has reviewed evidence suggesting dozens of Israeli women were raped, sexually assaulted, or mutilated on October 7th. Some freed hostages say they also suffered sexual abuse while in captivity, according to a group representing families. NBC News has not been able to independently confirm that. But there's another potential explanation for why Noah wasn't released. Two Israeli military officials told us the first wave of attackers at the music festival were heavily armed members of Hamas's elite commando unit, the Nukba. But in the hours that followed, thousands of other Gazans, among them gangs and militants, also poured into Israel. The men grabbing Noah and Avi Natan don't appear to be armed. They're not wearing tactical gear. An Israeli military official told us they appear to be part of the mob, not Hamas fighters. In the video of Noah in Gaza, she appears to be in an ordinary house. What looks like two barefoot women walk past. It's very different from Hamas's official hostage videos, which are deliberately designed not to give clues about their location. The evidence suggests Noah was not kidnapped by Hamas. They may not have her or even know where she is. Israel's government has said at least 20 hostages are dead, but Noah's name does not appear on their official list. Hamas has claimed that an unspecified number of hostages were killed by Israeli strikes, but they've never provided evidence. Though, in that leaked recording, the freed hostage says those strikes put them in danger. The Israeli military has since said it mistakenly killed 3 hostages in northern Gaza. While more than 100 hostages remain in captivity, stories from those freed have only heightened fears.
Some were treated very badly, did not get medical attention, were neglected, were actually tortured
It's agony for the families of all the remaining hostages, each with their own worries about time running out. But for Noah's family, time is especially short. Noah's mom is dying. Yes. And you worry she might pass away and Noah will still be inside.
This is our nightmare. We don't know when she'll be out, and we do know that Noah's mom is on a ticking clock. I hope that this is the ending that Liora, her mother, deserves, to see her child, to hug her child, and Noah getting a chance to say goodbye.
Noah, אני לא רוצה להגיד לך. אמא, אני לא רואה אותך. שתדע שאני אוהב אותך הכי הרבה.
This is a notebook we made for Noah. This is Noah in Hebrew. The idea is that when she will come back, we know maybe she will need her zone, her quiet. So she will have the words of us, of her friends, and get strong and know she's not alone.
For communities here, time violently stopped. Empty chairs, houses that aren't homes, life unable to restart without the missing on the far side of the fence.
The horrors of this war personified there. Ralph Sanchez with that incredible and haunting reporting. After a short break, we'll be right back. For those last-minute stragglers on holiday presents, and you know who you are, and you know you're out there, a big change right now from Apple could prevent some watches on your wish list from making it under the tree this year. Christine Romans, our senior business correspondent, explains why and also how you might still be able to get your hands on one anyway.
Hey there, we're talking about red-hot products like Apple Watches and apparel from brands like North Face and Vans. Those clothing companies hit by a cyber attack that'll say impact delivery times if you ordered your items online. And Apple halting sales of some smartwatches later this week due to a new import ban, meaning if you want to get a new one before the holidays, you better act fast.
With Christmas less than a week away, the race is on to snag those last holiday gifts. But trying to get some popular items this week may leave you singing bah humbug. Apple announcing it's halting sales of some of its best-selling Apple Watches, like the Series 9 and Ultra 2. Online sales will stop beginning Thursday, and in-store sales will cease starting Christmas Day. The company says it's doing this to comply with a U.S. import ban on some Apple Watches issued by the U.S. International Trade Commission. In October, the ITC ruled that Apple had violated a patent from one of its competitors, Massimo, regarding a blood oxygen sensor it uses on several models.
You can measure your blood oxygen right from your wrist.
They took our technology. So it's not just a patent infringement, it's also a trade secret theft.
The Biden administration has until Christmas Day to overturn the ruling, which doesn't impact sales of older models like the Apple Watch SE, the iconic accessory critical to the company's bottom line. Since its release in 2015, nearly $250 million have been sold. Apple shares falling on Monday, the company vowing to fight back, saying in a statement, Apple strongly disagrees with the order and is pursuing a range of legal and technical options to ensure that Apple Watch is available to customers. It's smartwatches among several hot items at risk of not making it under your Christmas tree. The parent company of apparel brands North Face, Vans, Timberland, and Dickies announcing Monday its ability to fulfill online orders is currently impacted due to a cyber attack on its computer network. Alternatively, it says customers can buy merchandise at one of its brick-and-mortar stores. Some consumers cashing in on potential shortages of these popular brands. One Apple Watch owner posting he plans to sell his $800 Ultra 2 for $2,500, saying, I know what I got. But some experts believe Apple's decision to pause smartwatch sales right before Christmas is actually a ploy to boost holiday revenue.
This is a great flash sale. Hey, get your Apple Watches while they're still there. This affects the two higher end models of the Apple Watch, and those are the ones they make the most money on.
Apple is reportedly working on a software fix for its Apple Watches that would address the patent issue. If you already own an Apple Watch with a blood oxygen sensor, you are not affected by this ban. Apple says Massimo, the competitor who filed the patent complaint, recently came out with its own smartwatch, and Apple claims it's a knockoff of the Apple Watch. Apple filed 2 lawsuits against them last year alleging patent violations. Back to you.
And it all comes full circle. Christine Romans, thank you so much for that report. You might say that our time here has completed for this episode of Stay Tuned Now, but we will see you again tomorrow evening. Have a great night.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.